Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Bets and Banter. And this week, we are, of course, talking about UFC Seattle, and it is going down from the great state of Washington. It should be a fun one. We've got a great card. We got Henry Cejudo, the messenger. He's coming back looking for a redemptive win or perhaps a final fight before he retires. A former champion, a very good fighter. He's taking on Song Yadong, a guy who's entrenched himself in the top 15. But can he take that next step? Can he go out there, prove that he could beat former champions, guys that are right on the cusp? Because if you look back, Henry Cejudo, he won a round against Merab Dvalishvili. He had he was one judge's scorecard away from beating Aljamain Sterling. So ultimately, our guy, Henry Cejudo, very quality, very serious fighter, but does he still have it at this stage of the game? He's a little bit up there in age. I'm fascinated by the card. I'm fascinated to talk about these fights. I wanted to just address off the rip, we've got some people mentioning it in the comments, some people asking questions, some people asked me on Twitter. So I just wanted to say it quickly off the rip. Me and Rich, we're cool. There's no problems between us, but we're no longer doing the show together. We did the show together for a while. We've done, different solo iterations by ourselves in the past. There's no beef between me and Rich. We just spoke about it. We decided it was best for us to do it this way. And that's just the way it is. So if you guys are looking for, content from Rich, you could still find that out there. God bless you. I encourage you to go check that out. I've always said, listen to multiple perspectives. And so we wish him nothing but the best, but for right now, we're just no longer doing the show together. And I hope that you guys still enjoy the show as it is right now. So we may have a different guest for the main card of this program. Still seeing if that's going to work out, but ultimately we're going to have different guests rotate through the show. That's how this show started back in the day, and we're going to have times where it's just me, you, and the sharpest chat in the game having this conversation. So God bless everybody. Appreciate the questions. Appreciate everybody. We've had, positive feedback, negative feedback all along the way. And I appreciate everybody that gave thoughts. I appreciate everybody's feedback, positive and negative. You guys can still let me know how you feel in the comment section down below. But right now, that's just the way that it is. So I'm reporting to you guys live, just telling you the way it is, like I always have tried to do. So being truthful and upfront and honest with you guys. That's the way it is. Nothing against Rich. Wish him the best. He's still going to be doing his thing. He's going to crush it. God bless him. And we're going to do our thing. And Lord willing, we'll crush it as well over here. So without further ado, guys, let's get into the fights. That's what we're here to talk about each and every week. Let's get into the card. Starting with the first fight of the night, Modestas Bukauskas, the Baltic Gladiator, is taking on Rafael Cerqueita, the Lion. And my man did not look like a lion in the last one, right? He looked like a deer in the headlights. Rafael Cerqueita out there taking on Ibo Aslan. And I think that, more than the punches, more than the strikes, what you really saw in that fight was a man that got overwhelmed by the moment. He got overwhelmed by the boos. Some people can take the boos. Not everybody can. And this guy was getting booed. They didn't want to see him out there. They wanted to see him fail. They were Ibo Aslan fans in the building that night. Rafael Cerqueita, not only is he going out there at 34 years of age to make a UFC debut, he's doing it against a young, hungry guy who's violent, full of piss and vinegar, on all the steroids in the world. And ultimately, it seemed like Rafael Cerqueita just didn't have it. In that moment, he broke and, he gave up. So how do we evaluate that? I think part of it you could just attribute to, hey, it's UFC jitters. It's kind of natural and understandable. You go from fighting on regional shows to fighting in front of a huge crowd that is rooting against you. It's a big step up. That being said, Ibo Aslan is not a very high-level fighter, certainly not in terms of what he's proven. He could be a good prospect. He's an athletic guy, but he's not gone out there and won a lot of UFC fights. So now you've got Modestas Bukauskas on the other side here. He's about a 500 UFC fighter over the course of his run. He got cut from the promotion. He's been brought back. He's an unremarkable guy as far as I'm concerned. I think what's good about Modestas is he's a tough enough guy. He's going to try and push. He's going to try and go out there and find a win. He's a guy that comes with good cardio. You've seen him compete for 4 and 5 rounds before. We've seen him come back and get late finishes on guys. If you push a really hard pace on Modestas Bukauskas, but you cannot keep that up for the full 15 or 25 minutes that's scheduled, he will come back on you. He will make you pay. but he's not the most aggressive and assertive fighter that you've ever seen. When you see a guy like Modestas come out there, a lot of times he's calculated, he's taking his time, he's working his angles, he's looking to set up to win a decision. And I think that in this kind of fight, it does make me think, maybe Rafael can get a little bit more comfortable out there. Maybe he can have a little bit more success. You see that Modestas is a pretty physical guy. He's improved his physicality since he got that injury. I think it was Khalil Roundtree just kicked his knee right out from underneath him. That was brutal to watch. And we've seen him come back from that, right? Admirably so. We've seen him do his due diligence on the regional scene to get back to the UFC, but he's still a guy that has a lot of vulnerabilities as far as I'm concerned. His chin is not very good. I'm still curious where his ground game is going to shake out with some of the better guys in the division. I think that is still an open question. And I do wonder, Rafael Cerqueita, the reason I was interested in this guy when he got to the UFC is he trains with high-level fighters. I believe it was Jailton Almeida that he had fought with on the team. Let me go back and look. Galpao de Luta. Let's see who is on the team here. Jailton Almeida is one of his teammates. So I remember Jailton had said that when you think back, this is a guy that, Jailton's giving him the praise. He said, man, this guy's a great grappler. He's very talented. I'm thinking to myself, if he goes out there and implements that grappling, he could have a lot of success. And I believe I took his submission prop at plus 750 the last time that he fought, and it just didn't work out, right? He ended up getting crushed really early. I do have my thoughts in this fight. Maybe he could come out here and show a better product. Let's go ahead and take a look at the betting odds for this fight, which I have not pulled up yet. We've got a plus 230 looking like the market-wide price on Cerqueita on the money line, minus 270, the price on Modestas Bukauskas as a favorite. This fight is minus 250 to end inside the distance, and Cerqueita by submission is as high as 20 to 1. I'm seeing it down to 16 to 1 on Bet Online. So this is a guy in Cerqueita who, he only has 2 submission wins on his resume, but he is definitely a guy who has a, credible submission game, a guy who can work that on the ground. We just don't see it very often in MMA, not in his tape, not in his footage. He is a guy that, if you have to criticize his style, he does shell up a bit on the feet, kind of hold his hands in front of his head. That is what cost him against Ibo Aslan. He did it too much. He did it in a stationary position along the fence line. He got hurt in that spot. And I think that when we look at, this fight, he does not want to do that with Modestas, but even if he does, I'm not sure Modestas is the guy that's going to make you pay with a, 5-piece combination, with a bunch of extended shots, with a lot of heavy blows. He does tend to pick his shots, get in and out of range, move around a little bit, maybe look for the takedowns himself. So I think that this is a more winnable fight for Cerqueita. If this was in the Apex, I would feel even better about it. But, in Seattle, I'm not sure how the travel factor is going to affect these guys here, but ultimately, I just think Cerqueita, after one UFC fight week, is probably going to feel a little bit more comfortable and also motivated, right? If he loses this one at 34 years of age, you got to ask, where is he really going with his UFC career? But to lose one off the trot, even really good fighters have done that before, then bounce back and show who they really are in their second performance. So for me, I'd like to see, who is Rafael Cerqueita really? I did not have any bets last week. Last week was the sectional championship. Very happy with how things turned out over there. I'm a wrestling coach. I just got my hair cut because we're going to the state championship with 6 athletes next week. So very excited about that. We're fired up. Congratulations to those athletes. Very well earned. And ultimately, that is my priority during wrestling season. But now wrestling season is winding down and we can turn our attention fully to the fights. And I'm excited about that as well. So much appreciated. I appreciate everybody asking and the kind words in the comments. Also, we got Glimbot saying Rafael round 2, 10 to 1 and round 3, 16 to 1 are interesting. Yeah, I don't know where his cardio is at. We did see Modestas just hit that round 3 comeback, but you guys have to remember Modestas is getting hurt, rocked in a lot of these fights. He got dropped badly by Jimmy Crute. You look back, this guy's chin is a little bit questionable, even on the regional scene before he got to the UFC. That is where you were able to test this guy. So I think Cerqueita inside the distance, Cerqueita money line, these are a couple different ways where he could make it interesting. I just don't really trust Modestas at these big prices. When you talk big prices, big favorite price tags in MMA, what you're really talking about is confidence intervals. And for me, Modestas, he's just not very high on my confidence intervals. But I will say, on the other side, you're paying for potentials, for the unknown of Cerqueita. He's not a very proven commodity. My goal this year, betting on more proven commodities. So if I was to bet on Cerqueita, it would definitely be a smaller bet. It would be a more hesitant position because he's not very proven. But I do think there is a fade opportunity potentially on Bukauskas here. I want to just pull up on betmma.tips. How has Bukauskas performed as a favorite in the past? Because my guess would be it's not great, but I do also think that the data set is going to be skewed by him being a favorite a bunch of times on the Cage Warriors shows, which I do think is something that you always got to be cognizant of. I think that the markets are a little bit sharper on the UFC than on Cage Warriors and the smaller shows, for example. That only makes sense. So if I could pull that up, I will. But otherwise, I think that we should take a look at what the sharpest chat in the game has to say about this fight. I hit that Modestas round 3 sub 55-1. Glenbot. This is why I always say the sharpest chat in the game. Appreciate you guys. Steven says, good luck with that. Congrats. Appreciate you, my man. Thank you. We'll have to see how it goes. We'll report back. I lean to the fave, but hate the money line. Pass on this one. Nothing wrong with that, Rick, the ruler. I think dog or pass is the lean for me here in terms of a betting perspective. And, passing, there's nothing wrong with, right? One of our opportunities, one of our edges as a player is that we don't have to involve ourselves with every fight. The book has to put out a line on every fight. So Lord willing, that's where we could take advantage of them, right? Is that they have to put out odds on each one of these contests, and maybe we zone in on 1 or 2 or 3 contests where we see a big edge. But if we are just firing at the board on everything, the one danger is now we're putting ourselves in a lot of positions where we have to get things right. And we'd rather put ourselves in 1, 2, 3 really good positions with an edge, or bet a bunch of small edges. That's fine too. But point being, what you don't want to do is chase these huge favorite price tags on low confidence intervals, especially on a UFC prelim in the light heavyweight division where neither guy's got a great chin and neither guy is extremely proven. I think Modestas deserve favorite here. I would probably put him at about a minus 185. So, seeing him upwards of minus 300, that just seems off to me. All right. Next up, we've got Nursultan Ruziboev taking on Eric McConico. And, oh boy, this is an interesting fight for me. When Ruziboev was an underdog against, who is that? Bruno Hulk Ferreira, I believe it was, that he was an underdog against in his UFC debut. Everybody told me this guy is a fraud. This guy is a bum. This guy sucks. This guy is in fixed fights. There's nothing real about this guy, Nursultan Ruziboev. He stinks. And I was like, at plus 190, he's huge. He's got some power. He's going to go out there and swing. He's got a decent enough ground game. I'm not saying it's anything world class, but he will attempt submissions on the ground. He'll attempt reversals. He's got some spirit behind him. So do I think he's the world's best fighter? Certainly not. But I just saw Ruziboev as a bunch of raw attributes, a lot of professional experience, a young enough guy. And I was like, why can't this guy go out there and win UFC fights? Well, we've seen it. He can go out there and win UFC fights. He could also lose UFC fights. Now he's back at 170 pounds. He's taking on Eric McConico here, who's a short notice underdog. And I got to be honest, the thing that stood out to me about McConico is he's not a bad fighter. He can rally from adversity. He's got some power in his hands, but he's also a guy that's willing to throw kicks and different kinds of kicks, right? Some guys are pretty meat and potatoes, right? They go out there and they just box, or maybe they box and they throw low kicks. But this guy will take a front kick to the face. This guy will throw a round kick to your head. He just goes out there and attempts a lot of offense. He'll do a jumping knee in the clinch, right? You've seen McConico go out there and fight guys like Maki Pitolo, former UFC level guys, and kind of put the beating on him. But we've also seen him get hurt, right? You've seen him get hurt badly, but we've seen him rally and recover and do a good job. the thing about this fight for me is I do see one of these guys probably getting served and knocked out in brutal fashion. When you look at Nursultan Ruziboev, he's a guy that can get into some pocket exchanges. What I liked about the Bruno Ferreira fight is he was doing a good job setting reads with the low kick, kind of figuring out, what distance do I need to be? How do I get this guy to respond? Kind of baited him to throw a low kick and then hit him really hard with a counter. I think that McConico in the early going is probably going to be a step behind here. We talked about UFC jitters for Rafael Cerqueita. Now you've got Eric McConico making his UFC debut in front of a Seattle crowd. It's early on the prelims. Maybe it's going to be a little bit quieter in the arena, but still, big moment, biggest fight of your life against a very seasoned guy in Nursultan Ruziboev, who's been out there a lot of times. So do I understand why Ruziboev is favored? Yes. Big guy, long guy. He's got good attributes. He's got a lot of experience as a pro. He's got more experience in the UFC. He's been fighting quality opponents. I think there's a lot of positives that you could say about Ruziboev. But I think on the negative side, have we seen him taken down and held down a little bit? Yes. And I think that McConico is a guy that can go out there and work a little bit of that game. He will press people into the fence. He will look to take their back. He has a pretty solid game and understanding, I would say, from the back take. So I think if he's able to establish dominant positions on top of Ruziboev, he could be very competitive here. I'm worried that he's going to leave his skills at home, like a lot of UFC debutantes, and he's going to find himself a victim of the moment. I definitely know that McConico could get knocked out in this fight. I think that's the biggest liability that he has. He may be a good live entry spot when you're thinking of how you structure your betting. If you're available sitting there watching the card the whole way through and you have opportunities to bet live in your jurisdiction, then this is a guy that may be a live bet candidate. If you see Ruziboev, who has been a known gasser in the past, a guy who's gone out there, spent a lot of his energy in the first 6-7 minutes of the fight, then not had as much left in the later portions of the contest, you could see an Eric McConico start to rally. I've seen it before where at the beginning of round 2, he's hurt badly. He looks like he's on the ropes. Somebody's trying to get him out of there. Then when he gets his composure back, he's not only back in the fight, he's chasing them down for the finish. He's looking to go out there and really put it to them. So I think McConico, despite the fact he's only had, a handful of the professional fights that Ruziboev has had, I still think he's a tough guy. I think he's a serious fighter. I think he's willing to go out there and come back with the shielder on it. So I'm expecting a violent fight in the second contest of the night here. I think both these guys know how to crack, and I think both these guys can get cracked with all due respect. So for me, I think that this feels like a violent fight. Let's go ahead and peek at what the odds have here. On the money line, I said it's a dog or pass situation. You're looking at McConico with a pretty wide market width. You're seeing as low as plus 210s and plus 215s out there and as high as plus 250s on the McConico side. So for me, I think that the McConico money line is probably a little bit wide in this spot because he's a debutant, but he's coming from a great gym. He's coming prepared for a fight, and he does seem like a guy who might have some of the skills that could challenge Ruziboev. He can hit back hard with the power. He can go out there and mix in his own takedown. So I think Ruziboev rightly favored. I just don't know that he's got the skills to pay the bills when it comes to these huge favorite price tags. If Eric gets Ruziboev on his back for a round or more, I think he has quit in him. And at 185, I don't think Ruziboev had his time to build back up from 170 due to Renat fight in October. Okay, interesting. I got to look at that timeline. Does Ruzi train with Sean Brady? Here he's with the Philly boys. That is my understanding, is that he does get work in with those guys. Why would you kick Just Win Baby off the show? I would not say that I kicked him off the show, man. We had a conversation. We came to a mutual agreement. It's not from a place of anger. It's just from a place of agreement. Hey, it would be better to move on this way, and that's what we decided, and we did it from a place of mutual respect. So I hope that you could respect that decision. It's no disrespect to him or you. That's all it is, man. Just from a place of love. Also, you got to understand we're not in the same time zone. There's already a bunch of different moving parts to the show. It's just at this time, it doesn't make sense for us. So I do appreciate the support, though. All the best, man. Adolfo Martinez says, hit the like, peeps. Support Liam. Hey, I really appreciate you, Adolfo. Thank you. I could use the support. I appreciate the support. It means the world. If you guys have been riding with me for a long time, there are people who've been doing this with me for years and years. Back when, there was only, 10 people here live at a time, things like that. And now, sometimes we have hundreds of people, here with us talking about the fights. And that's a joy for me. It's a pleasure. We're learning lessons each and every year, each and every fight, each and every card and event. So thank you guys for the support. But overall, for me, this is dog or pass for the first two fights. We got two upper weight men's fights, and I just think that both of these dogs have something to offer. On the Rafael Cerqueita side, he's a black belt that comes from a good gym, and he's taking on a guy in Modestas Bukauskas that I don't really trust. I think Ruziboev is a talented guy, but I think that he can go out there and get cracked on the chin, and I think McConico, the same thing is true about him. He's a UFC newcomer, so you can't trust him as much. He should be a dog, but should he be this big of a dog, almost 2.5 to 1, when he is a guy that's got knockout power, when he is a guy that will bite down on the gum shield when he gets hurt and try and rally back? I always talk about, I want a guy that wants to win as bad as I want them to win. So maybe for Cerqueita, you pump the brakes on that a little bit. But on the McConico side, I've seen him get hurt really badly, bite down on the mouthpiece like a dog, and fight back into the fight. And that's the kind of thing I like to see if I'm betting on you as an underdog in a UFC fight. So shout out to Eric McConico for that, and best of luck to him in his UFC debut. Speaking of UFC debutantes, guys, we're on to the next one, and I appreciate you for liking the stream, my man. Hey, if you guys don't mind, if you're on YouTube with us, go ahead and hit the like button if you feel so inclined, if you've been enjoying the show. If you want to hear more content like this, I break down each and every UFC card each and every week. So please go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and we'll be back next week to do it all again. So God bless, and I appreciate the support. But like I said, we got a UFC debutant. His name is Austin Vanderford. He's taking on Nikolai Veretennikov. And sometimes, guys, I use the expression dealt from the bottom of the deck. And if you look at Nikolai Veretennikov, I truly believe this guy has been dealt from the bottom of the deck. When you talk about how this guy's career is shaken out, he goes on the Contender Series. He fights Miles Morales. And what we know about Miles Morales is he's a very good fighter. Did I say Miles Morales? I meant Michael Morales. We've seen Michael Morales, is a very good fighter. And he hasn't lost a bout yet in the UFC. He's gone out there and finished guys that were ranked in the top 15. So we know he's very quality. We know that he's a guy that's earned his keep. Not only was he a good Contender Series fighter, he was a guy that has gone on to be a good UFC fighter. So I look at Nikolai Veretennikov losing that fight, and I say, man, that's a tough go of it, right? You lose to a guy that goes on to be a really solid UFC talent. Then he gets signed to the UFC, and he fights Danny Barlow. And Danny Barlow misses weight. It was a close weight miss. I think his coach said that he was sick. I really respect Danny Barlow. I think very highly of him. I thought that Veretennikov went out there and comported himself well in that fight. Did he go out there and get the win? Not quite, but he went out there and competed hard. I think that what I like about Veretennikov is he has been difficult, for people to subdue. He's a guy that likes to go out there and fight. He wants to go out there and push the pace. He's come up short against two talented fighters, but he fought him to the bitter end. So I do think that there are some good things to like about him. But on the other side, you got an Austin Vanderford that I don't really trust in his game. When you look at what he does well, he can wrestle, he can grapple from the top position. I just don't know that he likes the ruckus of fighting. I think that when you look at what he does well is he operates on top. He's a smooth guy. He's got a pretty decent top game. And he can wrestle for an extended period of time if he needs to. He can go out there, wrestle round one, round two, keep the ball rolling. But I do just think when you get him into extended striking situations, I do not think he's comfortable there at all. When we've seen him in these fights, obviously they're against higher level guys. Losing to a Gegard Mousasi, you're not going to hold that against him in terms of the name. But sometimes it's just about how something looks. The guy just looked like he was way out of his depth, way out over his skis. And now he's taking on a guy in Veretennikov who has kind of been around the UFC machine a little bit longer, kind of gets how it works, and he's fought some tough guys. He's gone out there and made an honest account of himself. So I just feel like Veretennikov, his back's up against the wall here. He kind of needs this one. in order for his career to continue. He's 35 years of age. He's not getting any younger. You got an Austin Vanderford who's got, avenues outside of the Ultimate Fighting Championship that he could use to make money, right? So I do think that could be a perverse set of incentives. But in terms of, where this fight is lined, I think this fight should be lined pretty close. You can't trust Veretennikov to go out there and be an A-plus player. He has been on the wrong side of these fights. And one thing my wrestling coach used to say, there's no such thing as a good loss, right? And there's obviously a little bit of tongue-in-cheek to that, but there's also some truth to that, right? You don't want to get complacent losing. Losing can become a habit. It can become a process that you fall back into, a psychological thought process pattern. So I think that when you look at Austin Vanderford, he rebounded off those 2 losses. He got a win back under his belt. He's now at 170 pounds. So I think that should be a little bit more competitive for him in terms of his size of body. I think 185 is a little big for him to compete, but Veretennikov is not a small man, right? He's actually going to be the bigger guy in this spot. So Brandon says, go back and watch Nicolay before UFC defend takedowns. Austin should get extremely easy top time here. Yeah, I do think that Austin has a path to taking him down. No doubt about it. Morales, the one thing is Morales is extremely physically strong. He's a big guy for the division. And he's a wrestler in terms of his background, Ecuadorian wrestler. So I know some people don't trust those credentials, but he is a wrestler by trade for sure. Obviously he's got other skills as well. He could strike, but if you look back, I believe it's Ecuadorian or Colombian. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think it's Ecuadorian wrestling. 90% sure. Great to catch you live, Liam. Best of luck this weekend with the fights and with the wrestling team. Thank you so much, Blunt Force. I really appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Drove says, yo, what's up? Magic Michael Morales says, robot, chicken wings. Absolutely. I do like MMA Lab. They have a great gym, says Rick the Ruler. I agree with that. This is a catch weight, and rumors are Austin knew about it for weeks. His only 2 losses come against great fighters. He will take Nicolay down and melt him. I love plus 120. Hey, fair enough. I definitely see where that line of thinking is. I just don't really feel great about this fight. My gut instinct was Veretennikov, but then he was favored like minus 150. And I was like, gosh, I would not pay that price. I do think that this is a competitive fight. If it plays out on the feet, I like Veretennikov. If it plays out on the mat, I like Vanderford. And for me, it's just a question of going back, taping a little bit closer some of the fights that Vanderford has had at welterweight. How did his wrestling look? How did it translate? What is the most recent tape on Veretennikov defending takedowns? How does it look? And do I think it's going to pass muster? And for me, this just was not a fight that was high on my priority list. It got announced a little bit late as well. So I'll do my due diligence on this fight, but this is certainly not one that was at the top of my priorities list this week, guys. Next up, guys, we got Ricky Simone taking on Javid Basharat. And I've been a Javid Basharat hater. I made a joke this week earlier on X. If you guys don't follow me there, you can over on X at LiamPicksFights. I try and put out relevant stuff about these fights, interesting videos, all sorts of different MMA content, but I try and keep it mostly focused on that. And ultimately, one thing I noted this week, Javid Basharat quietly hasn't won a fight in quite some time. He's coming off a no contest where he absolutely punted my guy Victor Henry in the nutsack, and Victor Henry had to go to the hospital. This guy's calling him a liar, saying that didn't happen. I didn't kick you in the balls. You're faking. Then Josh Barnett is reporting live from the hospital, like, no, I can assure you his testicles are extremely swollen. Just wild stuff. Only in MMA would you see something like that. But then you look at Javid Basharat also goes out there as a massive favorite over my guy, Amin Zahabi. And you guys can go back and check the show. You could check receipts on YouTube. You could check receipts on X. I was all over Amin Zahabi there. I thought that the price was insane, and it was insane. He went out there. He won a 29-28 decision. Some people still want to tell me to this day that Javid Basharat won that fight. I totally disagree. I think if you go back and watch the fight, Javid, what he does well is he could be an assertive guy at times. He can come out there, kind of stick behind a jab, stick a kick in your gut, get in your face, try and walk you down a little bit, try and mix in the takedowns. But one thing that has gone unremarked upon for my guy, Aiemann Zahabi, that should go unremarked upon no longer, his takedown defense is fantastic. I don't think anybody's taken this guy down since 2018 or something in the UFC. And you look at Javid Basharat, he tried to take him down. He tried to mix in that wrestling. What do people like to do when things are going poorly on the feet? They like to mix in takedowns. They like to mix in the clinch. They like to go somewhere else where they're not performing poorly. And what ultimately happened in that fight? Aiemann Zahabi, like he almost always does, draws a line in the sand, says, if you cross this, I'm throwing back hard combinations or single shots with my boxing that are going to be targeted, deliberate shots trying to hurt you, trying to take you out of your game, trying to get you off balance. And he did a great job of that. So I think we've seen, Javid Basharat at his best. He can go out there and get to the top position, wear on people using his cardio, leverage the fact that he's a long enough guy for the division. But when you look at this matchup, you're seeing in terms of the height, he's going to be the much taller fighter here. But height kind of works against you at times when you're trying to defend takedowns. Now, I think Javid Basharat does a lot of things technically right when it comes to wrestling, grappling, positions. But I think he's inferior to his brother Farid. I think that Farid is the much better grappler when it comes to these two brothers. I think Javid fancies himself the Conor McGregor knockoff, right? He's the guy who likes to do a little bit more flowing on the feet and a little bit more loosey-goosey stuff. And I do think that Ricky Simón, if he wants to win this fight, he's got to get dog nose with the takedowns. He's got to get a hold of this guy and, frankly, take his lanky ass, turn him sideways, slam him down, and start to make him feel a little bit sorry for himself. Because Javid is a mentally strong fighter, and he's a guy that does have pretty good abilities. But the way you get to him is mentally you pressure him, and you can break him down. He's arrogant. He's got a big ego. And if you fight the ego of Javid Basharat, you could beat him. If you go out there and try and fight the techniques skill for skill, it's going to be a harder fight, a harder night at the office against a guy like Javid. And I thought that what Aiemann did that was really smart was he used his footwork. He made Javid come to him at times. He landed big shots. He D'd up the takedowns. He made him frustrated. He made him work. And I think about this fight and I say to myself, Ricky Simón, against Vinicius Lockdog Oliveira, I was all over Lockdog there. I think it was a 1.67 unit bet. I was pretty confident that Lockdog was the right side in that fight at big plus money. And I do think we've seen a little bit of a decline in Ricky over time. The reason I haven't clicked Ricky at this point is because I'm a little bit worried that he's too far gone to go out there and get this win. But Aiemann Zahabi is no spring chicken. Right? He's actually an older fighter, I believe. I'd have to go check, but I believe he's an older fighter than Ricky Simón. And Aiemann was able to go out there and manage the fight because he had veteran experience, because he's a savvy fighter, because he's very technically good. And I think I would favor Aiemann to beat Ricky Simón straight up because he could D up takedowns really well, and I think he could just outbox him on the feet. But Ricky Simón, in terms of his class, his pedigree, where he's been at in the division, he's been to higher heights than a guy like Javid has been. And Javid has gotten a lot of credit without a lot of results to back it up recently. And did he win against Tony Gravely? Yes. But did he lose at least a round on at least a judge's scorecard against every UFC opponent he has ever fought? Yes, he did. Yes, he did in the UFC. So Oran Kolan was a complete fraud on Contender Series. He absolutely rinsed that guy position for position, every which way but loose. I'll give him that. But since then, every fight he's had in the UFC, he's either losing a round or the fight gets ended prematurely because he kicked the guy in the balls, or he loses the fight outright like he did against my guy, Aiemann Zahabi. So gone are the days where we are getting plus 600 to fade this guy, which is depressing. But if I had to pick Javid Basharat at minus 285 or Ricky Simón at plus 2XX, I'm taking Ricky Simón at plus 2XX every time. And I'm not a huge Ricky Simón guy. Again, I took Vinicius Lockdog Oliveira bigly last time out. I think that Ricky, here's what he's going to have going for him. Guys, if you don't know, some places are regional. And I think one of the big ones is the PNW, the Pacific Northwest. I do think they're going to rep hard for Ricky Simón, who's a local fighter, and I think they're going to cheer for this guy. You've seen Javid Basharat. Where has he done most of his fighting in the UFC? The Apex Center. So now he's out there in front of a crowd, finally a hostile crowd for this guy too. And what are they going to make of this fight? I think that in a lot of places, if Ricky went out there, tried to hump this guy's leg, push him into the fence, take him down, send him along the fence line, I think they would probably boo him. I think that if he does it in Seattle, there's a decent chance that they're going to cheer for him. So, for me, there is some marginal optic upside for a guy like Ricky Simón going out there, impressing the crowd by either landing one big punch and the crowd sells it for him. Oh my God, Ricky just landed the best punch of all time. Or if he goes out there and wrestles him into the fence, they are not too hard on him, right? They don't crucify him with boos from the top. Boo, you suck. They're like, oh, it's Ricky. He's a local guy. Let him go. So for me, I think that Ricky, he kind of knows where he's at in his career too, guys. He needs this win. He went from main events, huge opportunities, 5-round fights to now he's on a prelim, guys. He's against a UFC newcomer, so to speak. So I think this is a huge fight for Ricky Simón's career. He's only 32 years of age. I don't think he's ancient, but his motivation hasn't been there. His confidence hasn't been there. He sounded to me confident in the interviews that I listened to. I liked what I heard from Ricky. He said, hey, listen, I know what I got to do. I got to make this a dogfight with this guy. I got to go out there, bite down on my mouthpiece, throw at him. I got to make him work. I was like, man, he's saying a lot of the right things. Is he going to do the right things? That's a lot harder. But what he said was, in my opinion, the right sports psychology. He said, I'm extremely confident, despite how the results of my last fights went, because I'm confident in my training. I'm confident in my coaches. I'm confident in the work that we've put in. And I know and I believe in my heart that I've done enough to win this fight and that I've done the right things and that I have the skills. And that, maybe it's a great sales job, right? Maybe he can move on to selling, kayaks or something else after this. And God bless him for it if that's what he wants to do. But I'll just say this, man. Ricky Simón, the interviews that he gave sounded like a professional that knows what he needs to do, that's going to be excited to go fight in front of his people in the Pacific Northwest, put on, for those people, fight hard for 15 minutes with everything on the line. And I feel like Javid Basharat is a beatable opponent. He's given up rounds against Gravely. He's going out there and having competitive fights on the grappling against Mateus Mendonça, who's not on his level. So for me, I just feel like Ricky Simón, this is a guy that's fought 5 rounds before, right? Let's see if he can go out there and push hard, pedal to the floor for 15 minutes. This is not a guy with finishing power in the same way that you've seen from Vinicius Lockdog Oliveira, in my humble opinion. And by the way, did Vinicius Lockdog Oliveira fall off on his next opportunity? No, he cashed as a dog again for a 3rd time in a row. The guy's just been aces. So is it Ricky Simón's washed or is it Vinicius Lockdog Oliveira's the man? I don't know. I think it's still a toss-up. Is it, Ricky Simón is washed or Song Yadong is the man? I guess we'll get our answer in the main event. But I'm looking at a guy in Ricky Simón that is 32 years of age, that has a great set of skills, that's got a lot of professional experience, and he's a big underdog in this spot. For me, it's another dog or pass situation. That's the theme of the card for me, guys. I know that I'm a guy that typically likes to lean towards the dog, by default, but these are guys I faded in the past before. These are guys I bet on in the past before, and I'm just trying to call it the way I see it. Again, if you press me, gun to my head, who do I think wins the fight? Maybe Javid ekes out a split decision, but he doesn't strike me as a guy that's going to go cover big margins against a lot of fighters. So for me, it just seems like this is another competitive fight, and I think Ricky can go out there and make it honest. Ricky faced much steeper comp. Absolutely true. Amin is 36 years old. Yes, older. Absolutely he is. And also, guys, Amin's a beast. So shout out to Amin. If you're not following him on social media, go follow him. I really respect Amin and everything that he's accomplished, and he does not get the respect he deserves. Hey, Liam, glad to catch you live. Shout out to you, Azure. Thank you so much. Smash the like, people. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I want to just do this real quick. Take a sip, a pause for the cause. Hey, guys, God bless each and every one of you guys. Appreciate everybody who supports me and has my back. Appreciate everybody who rocks with the show. Appreciate everybody who supports the friends of the show as well, each and every one of them. So thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. If you guys are sipping coffee or whatever it is you're sipping at home, cheers to you. I hope that you enjoyed what you're sipping on. Robot Chicken Wings in the chat says, Liam, who you got, Shevchenko or Manon? I do typically like to keep my cards close to the vest, but for the sharpest chat in the game, I'm going to tell you the truth. I got Menifielld, new champion, the French woman. She's coming for everything that Val ever worked for. Alexa Grasso, thank you for your service. It's all done with you. We're on to the next one. Her time has come and passed again. I think it's Menifield's time. This French woman is built differently in terms of her physicality, extremely strong. So I will do a full breakdown on that fight when the time comes around. I will maybe do some reaction content a little bit later on as well to what we've seen in terms of fight announcements in the UFC. There was like 1 million fight announcements, and I did already give out some leans on Patreon last night. So I'll try and give those out to everybody once I see that there are lines posted and things like that. And again, it's just one man's opinion. So am I right? I don't know, but I'll tell you how I feel. I'll tell you the way that I see it. And the truth is, I just think Valentina Shevchenko likes to be a bully, likes to exploit people with a huge physicality advantage. Jessica Andrade and these people, she likes to take down small women and beat them up. She likes to take slow, stiff women that aren't very good strikers, like Jessica I, no disrespect, and kick her in the head and blow her out of the water. But I think that when she meets real resistance, Talia Santos, Alexa Grasso, she has a hard time. So I think that for me, this is the kind of fight where Val is going to be tested. And I think that Menifielld has power. I think she's got assertiveness. I think she's got 25 minutes of focus. I think she's going to win this fight, and I think she's going to blow her out of the water. But back to this card, guys. We're back in Seattle, and we're talking about the next fight on the card, Nick Klein versus Mansur Abdul-Malik. And I said that Mansur Abdul-Malik was one of my top prospects coming off the Contender Series last season. And I think that you guys can understand why. His athleticism, fantastic, right? He's got a great ability to compete in terms of when he goes out there and throws haymakers. He's a heavy-handed guy. He can kill anybody. When he takes them down to the ground, he's got good wrestling ability. He can hold on to people, control them. But I do think that the card is getting a little bit before the horse. When you're looking at the favorite price tags that he's gotten out to, Tapology is not even doing it justice. You're seeing plus 800 out there on Nick Klein, minus 1,200 on Mansur Abdul-Malik. I mean, obviously Mansur Abdul-Malik should be favored here. He's the better athlete. He's the guy that the UFC would, typically like to set up in a position to succeed. He's a marketable enough guy. He's very confident. He's young. He seems like he's got all the skills and abilities to go out there and pay the bills. But is his cardio there? I think that's still a question mark with Mansur Abdul-Malik. We've never really seen him get pushed hard in his fights. Let's go back and look. Mansur Abdul-Malik, guys, has finished each and every one of his fights, all of them in the first 2 rounds. So you say to yourself, okay, what about the Wes Schultz fight? The Wes Schultz fight in round 2 on Contender Series, he was huffing and puffing a little bit there. He did great. He did absolutely fine. He's a fantastic fighter. Wes Schultz went out there, made him work, made him move position to position. He did a good job. He's a teammate, I believe, of Nick Klein. So when you look at how that fight played out, I thought that Wes Schultz had a chance if he could extend the fight. And Mansur just was able to stay on top, keep hurting him, keep hitting him. Dude, if Wes Schultz pops out on his back after that first 7.5 minutes, I don't know that Mansur was going to get out of that. I feel like Mansur had spent a ton of energy. I feel like he had kind of put himself in a all-out, balls to the wall, I'm going to finish this fight situation. And I think it was Mike Tyson used to say, you can fight for the knockout or you can fight for the decision. But it's hard to do both. And Mansur Abdul-Malik is fighting for the knockout, man. He's going out there and trying to kill people. And he's got the power to do it. He's got the will to do it. He's got the explosiveness. He's got the instincts to do it. But we're seeing people in the chat saying these numbers are stupid. And I tend to agree. I'm a guy that really respects Mansur Abdul-Malik. I'll go ahead and share what I've got in terms of my UFC Seattle navigation document. And obviously, there's still work that needs to be done in terms of Julius Walker and some of these people. They're brand new fighters in the UFC. So while I did tape them before this show, I do have to write up some of the notes. I don't have them, yet. but let me see if I can find Mansur Abdul-Malik in my notes here. So if we go back, I want to just pull back up the best bets from the Contender Series article when he fought Wes Schultz. And if you notice here, I had actually noted Wes Schultz at plus 280 as the money line side. Let me go ahead and switch this. I am not technologically savvy, so my apologies, guys. But if you look here, this was my write-up, and I'm going to read word for word what my analysis was so you guys get a picture. Analysis. Abdul-Malik is a physical freak. Bursts of speed, power in his strikes, solid recoverability, and a clear presence inside the cage. Wes Schultz is the kind of guy who looks a little soft until he gets on top of someone and starts beating them up with ground and pound and sinking in chokes. Both fighters come from high-level wrestling backgrounds, getting recruited at the D1 level as undefeated high school state champions. Abdul-Malik is more likely to win via KO and more likely to win early because of his athletic gifts, his propensity to start hot, and his explosive finish rate. All 6 pro wins, round 1 stoppages. Schultz has been tested against UFC competition, lost a decision versus Budka, and he has been in the cage way longer in total fight time. If Schultz can make Abdul-Malik spend energy wrestling / adrenaline dump, he can win the fight. That's exactly how I feel about this fight with Klein. In the early going, Abdul-Malik is simply a much more physically dominant athlete. He can go out there and knock this guy's block off. He could be faster. He could be more dynamic. He could get to the point quicker. And he could just, frankly, beat the shit out of this guy. So I do think Nick Klein is up Schitt's Creek without a paddle in the first round. I think that the way to bet this guy, in all likelihood, is to bet him live. I think that if you want to bet a tiny bit pre, just so you don't miss the best of the number, I understand that too. I think that most often Nick Klein is going to get smashed in the first round in this fight. But I do think the way you beat Mansur Abdul-Malik is you drag him into a fight that's harder than he thought it was going to be. You make him tired and you make him give up, because a lot of guys that are dominant, physical bullies that like to come after people and beat them up and use their strength and physicality, which is a good thing, by the way. I'm not criticizing. But a lot of people that fight like that, when you can put it back on them, they do not love the way that that feels. And I do think that Abdul-Malik has been hurt before. If we watch his footage back, I forget the exact fights, but I know that it's happened. And he's never been deep in a fight. So if Nick Klein is able to go out there and extend him, maybe he's able to go out there and get the win. If you look at Nick Klein, he has been to a decision before. He has 3 wins by submission, a little bit more variance in his win patterns. And he has 1 loss via ground and pound. And it was in the 3rd round. He was able to extend that fight. So do I think Klein is, very likely to win the fight? No. Do I think that the price is fair to Klein? Probably not. So I think Mansur Abdul-Malik at minus 400 is probably about accurate. And the line has gotten way beyond that. So I will do a little more due diligence here. I didn't watch back a lot of Nick Klein footage. This is just gut feel, but it's also just my memories of Mansur Abdul-Malik. Like, I really respect the guy. I told you guys, I put out a tweet saying top prospect from the Contender Series, but you know who else was on that list? Austin Bashi. And just because you're a top prospect is a long-term statement. I used to say Yusuf Salal was a great prospect, and then he went 3-3 with 1 draw in the UFC and got cut. And maybe he was a failed prospect then, but he comes back a couple years later. Now he's on a 4-fight run. He just beat Calvin Kattar, biggest win of his career. And you say to yourself, man, okay, maybe this guy is talented. In this kind of spot, it's like Mansur Abdul-Malik has a way higher ceiling in the UFC than Nick Klein. He will go further, but could Klein win this fight? Yeah. Like, I don't see why not. It's a fight at the end of the day. So I think that I would favor Mansur for sure by a big margin, but how big a margin? 9 out of 10 times. It's like, this guy's never even been to a decision before. This guy's hardly been past the 7-minute mark before. Klein did put in a choke with no hooks. That's white belt stuff. He just has a killer squeeze, it appears. I'm telling you, man, in mixed martial arts especially, but just in general, if you have long arms, if you've got a really good squeeze, hooks are overrated. You do not need hooks, right? Like, I personally believe styles make matchups, right? I don't like to have hooks because I'm not a very big guy in terms of my frame. So I like to either have my legs in and ride like wrestling traditional legs, where I'm looking for guillotines, like power. And I don't mean jiu-jitsu guillotines. I mean like wrestling guillotines, like twisters, those kind of cross body rides, or I like to work for no hook chokes, because when I can get the no hook chokes going, I could stay in good positions and not extend myself. So you almost use them where you're non-committal about them. You lock a hold of them, and then you're willing to let them go to continue advancing position. But in that case, Klein had such a good squeeze on it that he was like, I don't have to let this go. We've seen Impa Kasanganay, a couple other guys pull that off in the UFC. So it's definitely doable. But I hear what you mean. The hooks, it's good to secure position with the hooks more than anything else. I generally avoid fading scary black guys and Russians. I can't back Klein in any way. Money line by method, nothing. I'm good. Fair enough, Rick the Ruler. Listen, again, I think Mansour's the deserved favorite. I just think the line's gotten out of hand. So dog or pass situation for me. All right, next up, we got Andre Fili taking on Mel Costa. Okay. This is an interesting one. In terms of a side, I don't feel great about this fight. I do think you can make a good case for either guy, and the line reflects that. It's minus 110 pick'em price. I think you can find maybe even money on an Andre Fili, but this is the kind of fight where I say to myself, all right, Mel Costa, what does he bring to the table? He's a young enough guy with a lot of professional fights. He's now had a couple of UFC fights under his belt, but I don't know that his durability is there, right? He's been finished in more than half of his pro losses. All of his UFC losses, he's been finished. I don't know that he is as talented as a guy like Andre overall. So what does he bring to the table? He's got a pretty good ground game. He's gone out there and submitted some guys. He's not a horrible striker. He can go out there and compete on minutes a little bit, throw some volume out there. But he can be submitted, right? He can be out grappled. We saw Thiago Moises kind of run shop with him, take him down, take his back, bully him around, audit him on the floor. And on the other side of things, Andre Fili's chin has been a little bit suspect, especially at this point in his career. He's getting dropped by Nathaniel Wood. They kind of went back and forth with dropping each other there. So Fili's got power. He's got the ability to go out there and hit people hard and hurt them, but he can get cracked on the return. One thing that stood out to me, I'm seeing a plus 140 on this fight not to go the distance. I'm seeing a plus 162, I think it was, for an under 2.5 rounds. I think both of those are kind of interesting because on the Mel Costa side, like I said, he's been finished in both of his UFC losses. He's gotten a finish before in the UFC. He's a guy that goes out there. He's willing to fight. He's willing to go out there and take risks, take chances, but he's also willing to give up at times if it gets good. When the tough get going, sometimes times get tough and he looks for a way out there. And meanwhile, you look at the Andre Fili side and he's tough as an old leather boot. But when everybody was telling me like it was a lock that Fili was going to win a decision against Joe Anderson Brito, I was like, are you guys sure? Like Joe Anderson Brito is going to come out here. He's going to try and throw some haymakers at this guy. I think he could hurt him. And I remember I bet 4 units plus 250. And, boy, how the times have changed, right? He went out there and absolutely smoked him in that fight. So we've seen Fili get finished on a handful of occasions. He's got 4 wins by knockout in the UFC. Mel Costa's another candidate to get served up by knockout. You look at Fili, I think he was about to knock out Pineda, and then Pineda, got poked in the eye or whatever happened there. So he ended up getting bailed out. But Fili clearly has power, and he can be cracked on the chin. He's had other guys' backs before in the UFC. Guys have taken his back. So I just think there's a lot of room for volatility, and you're getting plus money on the fight not to go. I don't hate that as a way to play this. So the other thing is Mel Costa going back and forth between 145 and 155. He's cutting weight to 145 in this one, could affect his chin a little bit. So I think that that's another potential angle here for me, where I like violence in this spot. So I just really don't feel great about a side here. Closely lined fight, competitive. I think either one of these guys could finish. So for that reason, I kind of lean towards violence. All right, folks. And the last thing I wanted to say, I don't know if I mentioned on the Abdul-Malik and Nick Klein fight, Abdul-Malik should have free takedowns if he wants them in the first round. He's the much better wrestler, and he does have hellacious ground and pound. So if he's efficient with his energy, smart, he should be able to go out there and get a ground and pound TKO in round 1 or 2. But I'm just trying to talk about money line pricing. That's the way I was approaching that. But from an analytical standpoint, obviously, I think he's capable of taking him down and finishing him with brutal ground and pound. So just wanted to make that point. All right, now we can move along to the next fight where we've got Iwan Cutelaba taking on Ibo Aslan. Let's circle back with the chat. Hit the like button, peeps, says Tron. Shout out to Tron. I could take a sip to that. Cheers. Big cheers to you, Tron. Cameron says, old gloves back, baby. Finished props are live again. Hey, Lord willing. Mel Costa doesn't have that dog in him, says Drew. I kind of agree, but I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. Still a young enough guy. Met Andre Fili in Vegas, was shocked to know he smoked cigs. His cardio is pretty good. Hey, just like Carlos Prates, man, cigarette cardio has never been so in vogue in the UFC. Costa trains with Joe Anderson Brito, who already fought against Andre Fili. Hey, speaking of, I cashed huge there. I always say that whether you want to say it was Andre Fili or Joe Anderson Brito, bought me Rangers tickets. I went to go watch the playoff games with the Rangers with my father. So absolute great memories from Joe Anderson Brito. Shout out to him. 10-1 to win that fight inside the distance, plus 250 to win it on the money line. And I had 4 units on the money line as well as some ITD exposure. I got lit up in my own comment section about how I was so stupid, how Andre Fili was the free parlay leg of the week. And what happened? The parlay boys did not come back with the victory that time. It was one for the dogs. So hopefully the dogs will be barking once again in Seattle. Blunt Force says under 2.5 rounds, Cutelaba fight for sure. Cutelaba at plus 150, getting some of my money in a coin flip fight, in my opinion. Let's talk about it. Is this a coin flip fight? Yeah, I suppose so. You know, if I had to make a slight favorite, I'm not going to lie, I would make it Ibo Aslan, just because one of the things you have to consider when you're pricing these fights is the live market. So I do think that if this fight extends past the first 5 minutes, there's a decent chance the live market is going to come in on Iwan Cutelaba. I do think the biggest chance for him to lose this fight is to get knocked out brutally in the first round. I think Iwan Cutelaba's chin is a little bit questionable. I do think he can get hurt, get rocked. But in a lot of fights, the problem for Iwan Cutelaba is he gets hurt, he gets rocked, he becomes extremely predictable. He's going to shoot a shitty takedown, and he's going to put his neck out there. And so against Kennedy and Zechiku and some of these fighters, you know, you kind of knew he was vulnerable, susceptible to putting his neck in a bad spot, to maybe going out there and getting hurt with strikes, getting finished, not having the cardio to go the full 15 minutes that he needs to. But looking at this fight, you know, you say to yourself, okay, if he was to get hurt on the feet and he shoots a takedown, is Ibo Aslan going to like drop guillotine? Is he going to pull guard on him or something? Like, I don't see that at all. I do think that Ibo is a guy that has a very limited skill set, but he knows where his bread is buttered. He goes out there to be extremely aggressive on the feet. He goes out there, I think, with a little bit better durability than a guy like Cutelaba. And he goes out there to throw. He goes out there to land hard. He goes out there to overwhelm his opponents with aggression. The Anton Turkalj fight did show a growth in his game, but it also showed the limitations of his game. What do I mean by that? The growth in his game is that he went from losing that fight, gassing out in 6 minutes, to having the 14 minutes or 12, 13 minutes, whatever it was that he needed to win that fight in the 3rd round and to outlast a guy like Turkalj. But Turkalj sucks, and he didn't have any success at the UFC level. No disrespect. So then you say to yourself, okay, what has Ibo Aslan proven? He beat one guy that's had no success at the UFC level, and he beat another guy that's had no success at the UFC level. So what has Ibo Aslan really proven to us? The answer is nothing. What he does have is potential, power, aggression, and marketing ability. I will tell you guys this. I make this document every week as well, which is the social media A-side report. And the social media A-side report is not supposed to be a fully predictive document, but it's just supposed to be a reference center, right? It's supposed to help myself and anybody else who's interested understand what we're looking at from a social media perspective. So these are the rank ordered social media followings for the fighters competing on this card. And you'll notice that I did not include everybody because some people's social followings are so insignificant that I don't think it would matter to the bottom line of a company, big or small. But here's the bottom line. The rank ordered social followings of this card from biggest to smallest. Number 1 is Nursultan Ruziboev with 1.6 million followers. Huge following for the Black Wolf, I think his nickname is. I could be misremembering. Let me go back and check now. It's just Black Nursultan Ruziboev. Okay. Then you go back and look. Henry Cejudo, guys. The messenger, Henry Cejudo, the Olympic gold medalist, is the second most popular fighter on the card. Can you guys identify for me number 3 and number 4? They're both in this fight. Ibo Aslan, 381,000. Big following for a kid that's only had a handful of UFC appearances. I think that is something to pay attention to. Meanwhile, Iwan Cutelaba, a UFC lifer, so to speak, a guy who's been around forever, he's got 198,000 followers. So I do think from a general marketing standpoint, people are, welcome to agree, disagree. I just think the way that the UFC approaches these things, they would probably prefer if a guy with a huge following who knocks people out in the first round, like Ibo Aslan, could continue his winning ways, go out there and leverage that 2.5-inch reach advantage, that 2-inch height advantage. They would love to see that, right? He's on the right side of 30, young guy, represents the Turkish market. It's got a lot of, aggression, and he's a handsome enough guy. There's just a lot of things that you like about Ibo Aslan if you're selling fights. But when you're talking about just who has proven more in the cage, Iwan Cutelaba has gone 15 minutes hard in the UFC before. He's gone out there and earned decisions before. He's gotten 10-8 rounds before. He's hurt people and knocked them out before. So you just know that Iwan Cutelaba has a variety of skills. He can go out there and compete. For me, I would probably rather enter on Iwan Cutelaba after one round, after he just got, beat up to the tune of a 10-9 and he's got some blood on his face. I'd rather enter on Cutelaba 3-1 in those circumstances, knowing that he survived Aslan at his freshest, than I would entering on him in my humble opinion. But I have to do a little more due diligence on this fight. I can't trust Aslan, a guy that I think is very limited in his skill set and his cardio at a favorite price tag, point blank, period. That's the end of the discussion for me. So best of luck, guys. The three-letter I names are battling it out. Somebody's got to get the win. Ibo or Ion Cutelaba. For me, it's just not one that I feel compelled to have my money on. Next up, we got Alonzo Menifielld taking on Julius Walker. And I took the opportunity to tape Julius Walker today. Julius Walker, 25 years of age, and he's a raw prospect. When you look at Julius Walker, there's definitely some room for growth, right? The guy is young in the game. He's young, period, right? I'm around the same age as this gentleman. So shout out to Julius, by the way. He follows me on Twitter. He follows me on Instagram. So I really wanted to just give him a shout out. He seems like a good guy, a nice guy, and God bless him for it. We wish him nothing but the best this weekend. Against Alonzo, I think there's one really huge concern that I have for Julius here, or let me say there's two big concerns. The two big concerns I have are as follows. Number one, Julius is like very wild, loosey-goosey when he comes out there. He's taking big risks. I really admire part of his style. And what I mean by that is Julius is not afraid of where the fight is going to take place. Meaning if you take him down, he's not afraid of that. He's looking to get back up to his feet. He's looking to keep the scrambles going. He wants to make people work so they get tired and they start to break, and then he takes over the fight. He has the ability to go out there and kind of set that emotion early, make a guy quit by getting in his face and breaking him down with a couple shots. But at his best, I think this guy, Julius Walker, can make somebody second guess themselves in terms of their work rate, their want to be there. And I really like that about him. But on the other side of things, if you let a guy who's big, strong, powerful, physical, like Alonzo Menifielld on top of you, he could do the Askar Mozarov where he just opens up and starts smashing this guy. from the top position, because Julius Walker does end up on his back a lot of times in his fights. Or, he could knock him the fuck out on the feet. Because if you look at Alonzo, he throws hard. He does have power in his hands. He's not the most dangerous knockout threat you've ever seen. But I've seen Julius Walker get stung badly in the early going of his professional fights on the regional scene. So for me, there's definitely some reason to say, like, this could be too much too soon. Julius Walker could have UFC jitters. He could experience, some negative emotions. You never know how somebody's going to feel. He is a very young man. He's stepping into a huge opportunity, and he's doing it without that much pro experience against a guy who's been around the UFC for a long time. However, when you talk about who is going to do more if this fight goes 15 minutes, for me, the answer is Julius Walker. When you look at what the guy does, he works hard out there. He tries shit. He goes for flying knees. He goes for punches. He goes for knees to the body. He goes for submission attempts. He goes for passes. He goes for reversals. He goes for stand-ups. The guy tries to work hard for the whole fight. And does he do everything perfectly? No. You could tell he's still green. You could tell there's still some work in progress to what he's doing. But the guy wants it. The guy's working hard. The guy's not afraid of a fight. And when he did get hurt really badly in his fight, and I forget which fight it was. If I went back through his resume, I could maybe come up with it for you. But there's one fight, he gets buzzed. Pop, pop, 1-2 right off the rip. And you know what he does? He recomposes himself, shoots a takedown, gets on top of the guy, and finishes him. So I think that this guy, Julius Walker, if he can get the top position, he could absolutely win this fight. I do not trust Alonzo Menifielld underneath. I don't trust him to not quit. I don't trust him to not make huge mistakes. I just don't trust him, period, point blank. As a favorite, I don't think of him as a trustworthy guy. When you look at what Alonzo brings to the table, he's got losses to William Knight where he literally did nothing. He just let the fight pass him by. And I think that at his worst, he's there to be cracked on the feet. We've seen him knocked out before in the UFC. In his last 2 fights, he's been knocked out. Where is his confidence at? Where is his cardio at 37? Where is his level of preparation at? Julius Walker wanted to be here. He asked for this fight card. He asked to be on the show. He wants this opportunity. So can he cash in? That I don't know. But people think that this kid's just going to go out there to be an easy mark. I don't think so, man. Maybe he's too happy to be here. I worry about that a little bit, but I don't think he's an easy mark. I think he's going to go out there and compete. He's a former heavyweight. I think that he's going to go out there and give it a shot. So for me, Alonzo's the better athlete, the more experienced guy. I think that the earlier odds were a lot more accurate. -170 Alonzo Menifielld. Now you're looking at Julius Walker over a 2-1 underdog in this spot. And I think Julius Walker has a chance to win the fight. I think he's got a path to victory. So for me, it's kind of interesting, surprised by the line move. I'll just leave it there. Askar Mozarov was a legit fraud. I think Julius Walker is a prospect that's getting here a little green, but I don't think he's a complete fraud. He's beaten former UFC level guys, right? So I don't think he's a complete fraud. And I don't think that's fair to him. Also, he's got the height and the reach here, right? All the anthropomorphic advantages, a lot of things to like on the Julius Walker side. The things not to like is the lack of experience, the fact he got cracked badly on the regional scene, and the same thing could happen here. And he could end up in the bottom position. But ultimately, I like his jiu-jitsu. I will say this, his jiu-jitsu is clever. He goes for a Kimura trap all the time from the top position and the bottom position. He uses it to pass when he's on top. He uses it, from like a rear waist cinch to get rolls started and to get people into bad positions. He hit a triangle choke off of a Kimura trap setup. That was beautiful stuff. So I really think that the guy has an interesting grappling game, but it's going to be hard to pull off on Alonzo Menifielld, who is a very strong brute force athlete when he's fresh. When he gets tired later on, there's a chance for Julius Walker to make something happen, I think. So should be a fun fight. Next up, we've got my boy Gene Silva taking on Menifielld Baghdasaryan. And this is a fight where, I'm going to say the same caveat that I've given on a couple of these other fights. This is a wide money line price. However, I am just going to pick Gene Silva to win this fight outright. And the reason being is pretty straightforward for me. I respect Baghdasaryan. I think he's a good fighter. I think he's got sound striking mechanics. I just don't think he's an MMA fighter. I think he's a kickboxer that is masqueraded as an MMA fighter. I don't think he's got a ground game to speak of. I don't think he's got wrestling at a high enough level to compete in the UFC long term. So for me, I think that Gene Silva has the better ground game. I think that he's got the better wrestling game. And I truly believe that if these guys compete on the feet, we have seen a guy like Kevin Vallejos go out there and take the first round from John Silva because he does go out there and compete in close quarters. He does go out there and throw heavy hands and exchange, and he's willing to take on those crazy fights. But what separates him from his opponents in those fights? Kevin Vallejos is a young kid, very talented, that wants that fight back with Gene Silva. But what do we know about how that fight went? He started strong and he could not keep up with Gene. When Gene pushed the pace, when he pushed the issue in round 2 and round 3, he put his foot on the gas. He pushed forward. He made sure, I will leave no doubt. I will set the tone. This will be my fight. And Baghdasaryan, guys, doesn't do that. He starts to slow down in round 2 and 3. He starts to feel sorry for himself in round 2 and 3. He starts falling over. Josh Cutelaba takes his back, fights all over in round 2. That's not good for me because I feel like Gene Silva is a way more opportunistic finisher than Josh Cutelaba, right? I think that he hits harder. I think he's meaner. I think he's more aggressive, more assertive. I think he comes from a better team. So for me, I just think Gene Silva, he's got a lot of things going right for him. And, this is definitely a huge money line price. And he might go out there and lose the first round, and this money line price will look insane after one round. I'm just saying, who do I think wins this fight? I think the bigger dog in this fight is Gene Silva. And I think that he's got the ability to go out there and win this by every method, knockout, submission, decision. I think he could win anyway. So it should be a fun fight and a competitive scrap early, but I think Melsik doesn't have the battery to go the full 15 with a guy like Gene. So give me Gene Silva to win this fight and probably by finishing the second or third round. Next up, we got Rob Font taking on John Matsumoto on the main card. And this is a fascinating fight. It's a really good fight. It's a high-level fight. I did talk about this one on Patreon. This is one that I am looking at the Rob Font side. When you look at Rob Font, what he brings to the table, he's up there in age. That's the concern, but he's big for the division. 5'8", 71.5-inch reach. This is at a 140-pound catch weight, and I think that people don't really understand. At 140-pound catch weight, Rob Font, who's normally a massive bantamweight, cutting a lot of weight, and as he gets older, it's harder and harder to cut that weight. Now he doesn't have to cut that last 5 pounds. That would have been really tough for him. So now Rob's going to get to come in and leverage that size advantage and feel good. I think that's big for him. The other thing is, guys, when you pull all that water out of your body, what does it really hurt? Your brain. So Rob Font pulls all this water out of his body to make 135 pounds. Then he gets punched in the head and his head rattles and he starts to lose his balance, his equilibrium, right? Now he doesn't have to do that. So I think that's a good thing for Rob Font. Now let's talk about the fight itself. I tape both these guys. What do you come away with? You're impressed by both guys, right? What does John Matsumoto do really well? We'll talk about him briefly. John Matsumoto, 16-0. He's a good anti-wrestler. If you go out there with a wrestling, grappling, heavy game plan, you can take him down, right? He's given up 14 takedowns in 3 fights between Contender Series and the UFC. You could take down John Matsumoto, no doubt about that. But he's hard to hold down, right? And he's one of these guys, I kind of just mentioned it before, right? Julius Walker, he's moving, he's doing stuff. But John Matsumoto, he's not just trying to grapple back into you like Julius Walker. He's more so trying to clear out and then make you wrestle again, and then clear out and make you wrestle again, because he likes the guillotine. He likes the front headlock series, but otherwise he doesn't really want to wrestle and grapple with people. It's kind of the secret to John Matsumoto. He'll get a takedown here or there, but it's really not his go-to. He prefers to either look for that guillotine, anti-wrestling, anti-grappling type mechanics, right? Force people into bad shots, force them down the leg, grab a hold of the chokes, do damage while people are wrestling onto your legs. A lot of smart stuff from him. But then you see the Katona fight, right? And Brad Katona is a guy that I have been disrespectful to in the past, and not disrespectful like but just like a guy that I didn't like his style because he didn't finish people, and it was a lot of workman-like decisions. Even guys he was way better than, he's just going out there and earning a workman-like decision. He hurt John Matsumoto when he fought him. He busted him up, he cut him, he had him bleeding, and Matsumoto bit down on his gum shield, fought back, found ways to land on Brad Katona, to bust him up, to cut him up. To stuff a lot of the takedowns. I really truly believe that if Brad Katona had that fight to do over again and he wrestled 50% less and struck a little bit more, used a little bit more footwork, I think he could beat John Matsumoto. I truly believe that. If you go back and look, it was a 29-28 decision across the board. Unanimously, the first round went to Brad Katona. The second round went to John Matsumoto. He landed a lot of damage in that round. Round 3 was a very close round, but Brad Katona was committed to wrestling. He forced it, wrestling. And John Matsumoto just landed a little bit more in the striking, got that close round. I think that this kid defensively is not there. He's got good offense. He throws hard, committed counter combinations. He has good low kicks. The guy's got good presence. Like, there's a lot to like about John Matsumoto's game, but does this guy address clinches well? My answer is no. And I think Rob Font hits very hard off the clinch. Ask Adrian Yanez. Ask Kyler Phillips. Those guys were getting cracked off the break. I think that when you look at what Rob Font does, he can keep this kid at the end of a jab. He could throw some hooks and bust this kid up a little bit. He can go to this kid's body, keep him in a high guard with that jab, poke him, get that jab up high. So that way the hands follow, then bam, rip him to the body like he was doing against Kyler. And Kyler was doing a lot of backing up. This kid will stand a little bit more ground. And that means that Rob's not just going to be hitting with grazing shots. He's going to be fucking landing hard on this kid. And I do think that John can land back. My biggest concern for Rob in this fight is that he gets knocked out, because I do think there's a world in which he gets hurt badly by John. John does sit on his counters. He throws in the pocket. He's willing to exchange. But what else is he willing to do? He's willing to step up for this fight 2 weeks earlier than he was supposed to fight. He's taking on Rob Font. Guys, this was a guy on UFC prelims, a smaller favorite against guys that are never ranked in the UFC, that were never ranked in the UFC. Rob Font, he's lost to the best guys in the division. He just went out there and beat Kyler Phillips, a guy who was younger than 30 years of age, prospect age fighter. He just went out there and tuned him up in rounds 2 and 3. And by the way, how did Kyler Phillips beat him in round 1? Took him down, wrestled him aggressively, relentlessly. Do I think Matsumoto could go out there and take down Rob Font? Yes, I do. Do I think he could relentlessly hold him down? I'm not sure about that. Rob Font has 10x'd his get-up game in the last 5 years. The guy has gotten better at getting up off the ground, keeping working. I thought that the Corey Sandhagen fight was an indictment. Other than that, this guy has shown a great get-up game. This guy has shown a willingness to try and work back up to his feet, keep fighting. And as far as I'm concerned, man, Rob Font was supposed to fight Dominic Cruz on a huge fight in a main card, and he was prepared, going hard, training at TriStar, great gym, learning with the best guys, training with Ayman Zahabi, another guy who's an elder statesman, who's finding his way as a top 15 guy. And John Matsumoto, another guy, bright future, excellent skills. I think personally, this is too much too soon. I think Rob Font is going to paint the canvas with this guy's blood. I think he's going to jab him up from distance. I think he's going to keep him dancing to his tune. I think that there is some, equity for Gene Matsumoto making it a hard fight. This could be a fight of the night type of banger, back and forth, you take me down or whatever. But what do I like about Rob Font? Cardio, confidence, consistency. That's it. He goes out there and 15 out of 18 UFC fights, he outlanded his opponent on significant strikes. This guy does not fucking come out there to be a punk for anybody. He plays for keeps. Does he have more knockdowns than his opponents in the UFC? Yes, he does. 7 knockdowns to 5 for Rob Font. So this guy hurts people. This guy gets back up when he gets hurt. This guy looks for the finish. This guy looks to go out there and outland you over 15 minutes, 25 minutes. He's got experience in main events. He's got experience against top guys. He's got experience against champions. I believe Rob Font is a proven commodity, and I think John Matsumoto is a good fighter on the come up, but I still think he's got a lot to learn. Brad Katona took him to school in October, nearly got the win. And I think that now Rob Font is going to go out there and let him know what time it is. Y'all must have forgot. Rob Font, TriStar in the building. I think Rob Font's getting the win. All right, folks, next up, we got Brendan All-In Allen in the co-main event. Want to just say, if you guys don't mind, go ahead and drop a like on this video. It really helps out the channel. If you guys are not already, get subscribed to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. It'll let you know when we go live. Haven't decided exactly on the new start time for Bets and Banter. If you guys have feedback about that, please let me know in the comment section down below. I really appreciate your thoughts and feedback as well. Big swig of the coffee, and we're right back at it for the co-main event of the evening. Wanted to shout out each and every one of you guys. We have 69 people, 71 people. Shout out rocking with us live now on YouTube, 308 people on X. If you guys are on X, go ahead and hit the retweet button. It would mean the world to me. Help other people find the show. If you guys are new here, you're finding me on X for the first time, hit that follow button. A lot of great mixed martial arts content headed your way in the near future. Shout out to Cameron in the comments, says, Gene's a gilly merchant. I don't think Font is going to put himself in that position. He's only been guillotined once by one of the best guillotine fighters in the history of the sport, Pedro Munoz. And even then, he was hurt badly by a body shot prior to that. So great point by you, Cameron. I do think it's possible, but I also think it's very unlikely. Speaking of unlikely, it's unlikely for me that somebody's going to get finished in this fight early on, because both these guys know each other's games very well. We've got Brendan All-In Allen, Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. What do we know about Brendan All-In Allen? We know he likes to force his game towards taking the back, right? If you look at a guy like Brendan Allen, he's trying to force people into back take exchanges. That is where he is at his best. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt. He's a guy who's very competent with the rear naked choke. Most of his UFC wins are coming via that method. The other thing is, though, Brendan Allen has evolved into a more competent striker over time. He started out as a guy who was very uncomfortable on the feet, very susceptible to being hurt, rocked with shots. We saw him get finished by Chris Curtis. We saw him get finished by Sean Strickland. We know that this guy can be got to on the feet. However, we know the same thing is true of Fluffy. We know that he could be hurt on the feet. Kevin Holland very quickly was able to subdue him with knees to the body. We know that Fluffy Hernandez can be susceptible to body shots. We know that Brendan All-In Allen can open up with big open side body kicks. We saw against Punahele Soriano, he painted his side, a completely ugly shade of purple by just open side body kick over and over and over again all night. And I think that Brendan Allen, if he's smart, is going to come out in this fight trying to hurt Anthony Hernandez on the feet, trying to make this a brawl, because Anthony Hernandez is the kind of guy that can be hurt, that can be rocked, that can be damaged. What can Anthony Hernandez do? If he drags you into a difficult fight, it is going to get so hard for you to keep up because his pace is incredible. We know that people can weaponize pace at the highest levels of the sport. Merab Dvalishvili went out there, lost the first round unanimously to Henry Cejudo, and dominated so hard in rounds 2 and 3 that people forget about round 1 because his pace was so incredible that Henry could not possibly keep up. Anthony Fluffy Hernandez is the middleweight version of Merab Dvalishvili. Now, is he quite the same? No, nobody's quite the same as Merab. But what does he do? He leverages pace. He leverages pressure. He goes out there, gets in your face. Is it technical? Kind of. Is it perfect technique? No, that's not what it's about. It's about staying in your face, making you fight all night long with hands on you, keeping you working, keeping you under duress. Because when people are under pressure, they make mistakes, they want to give up, and they concede. So instead of making it a hard fight where I have to go out there and use my perfect techniques and make sure I don't make any mistakes, I could make 50 mistakes as long as I make you more tired than me. So Fluffy is the guy that I try and emulate the most with my guys. In terms of how I coach athletes, I don't coach people to be Brendan Allen. I'll just leave it there. I coach people to be Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. Why? What do I want out of my athletes? I tell them, you only need one exchange to go right for you. That's true. You do not need in the sport of wrestling to win by 14 points. That's great. If you can go out there and be 15 points better than your opponent, God bless you for it. Go out there and do it. But you don't need to be. You need to be one exchange better than your opponent. Because if they're up by 14 and you put them on their back and the referee calls the fall, it's over. And nobody's going to ask what the score was at the time that they got pinned. So what happens with Anthony Hernandez fights? Anthony Hernandez goes out there with a suicide pace like it's a good day to die. He is willing to go out there and get himself extremely tired in the pursuit of you getting tired. And when that happens, he knows that he has more to give than you do. I will say Brendan Allen had a great list of excuses, right? He basically said the commission tried to poison me. They're withdrawing my blood before I go out there and do a 15-minute fight against the top guy in Imavov. That's all true. You got to just say like, hey, that's a tough go of it. What do you do? But the visuals that he gave in those fight, he was out there huffing and puffing, feeling sorry for himself in round 2 and 3. That's not going to work against Anthony Hernandez because Imavov is the guy that also is feeling sorry for himself. We've seen it before, like in hard 5-round fights. Imavov, when he doesn't get the finish, he starts to be in his own negative headspace, starting to feel sorry for himself, starting to get tired, right? So if this was a 5-round fight, I agree with the chat. I would like it a lot more for Fluffy. If you go back and watch the first time these guys fought, which I really encourage you to do, it has the greatest commentary ever. Pat Miletich in that fight says, I'm just going to say it, like a hooker on rent day. It's so funny. Like, I just can't even imagine. Pat Miletich should get one opportunity to commentate a UFC fight just for that reason. He should be here on commentary for this contest. But Fluffy makes, suboptimal decisions at times in the grappling, but his pace is incredible. And Brendan Allen could not maintain dominant positions on Fluffy. He could not find ways to punish Fluffy. And Fluffy was able to continuously outsmart him, out-hustle him, and out-position him over the course of 25 minutes. And I do think that Fluffy can be hurt. He can be cracked on the feet. I think that that's his biggest vulnerability against everybody. But Roman Kopylov, in my opinion, is a more dangerous striker than Brendan Allen. A more dangerous kicker, a more dangerous body worker, a guy who can go out there and really hurt you. And I think Brendan has excellent grappling. So for me, this is not an easy fight to go click the -300 for Hernandez. But if you're asking me for a pick, I do think Hernandez wins the fight. I think Hernandez is the better fighter. I think he will be the fresher fighter after 15 minutes. But I also believe Brendan Allen is not a punk. Brendan Allen is a good fighter. Brendan Allen has gone out there and shown, that he's a very skilled guy. I see Tristan saying Brendan Allen has better BJJ. I get where you're coming from there, but I don't think he's got a edge in the BJJ. I think if anything, he's got a small edge. He's a big guy. He's got a little bit of leverage, but if you go back and watch their exchanges when they used to grapple in that fight, it was very competitive grappling. And I think Fluffy has gotten way, way better than the first time he fought Allen. Allen has gotten better as a striker, but his grappling, in my opinion, hasn't made massive improvements. I think his grappling is still good, but Brendan has a very traditional grappling style. And what I mean by that is he wants to take the back. Like it's a very effective way to fight, right? Like we all know that if you can get the back, it's a very effective way to fight in mixed martial arts. But are you going to rear naked choke Fluffy? I think that's going to be hard to do. I think the way you get to Fluffy is you hurt him and then you make him, kind of go through his own brutal feelings, right? Of like being put through the series, being put through those work. But you look at Adolfo had him in some serious negative grappling situations. He survived them all and gassed Adolfo from bottom. So I'm just saying, like, if Brendan Allen commits to a grappling game plan here, I think that would be a huge mistake. I think he should go out there and try and sprawl, brawl, and strike. And if he does that, he does have a chance to win this fight on the feet. I just think Fluffy is extremely comfortable in a jiu-jitsu fight because he's doing thug jitsu. He's not there to get the back and be very clever and clean in his technique. he is trying to be violent and make you tired while also advancing positions. So he'll go to like a half committed seated Ketagatame, right? He's like sitting to the choke and it's like a seated head and arm, but he's very non-committal about it. If you base out hard, then he will then take your back and try and punch you in the face again. And when you build back up to turtle, he will threaten to go back to the seated Ketagatame. It's just like he will put you through the washing cycle. And if you look at what happened to Brendan Allen against Imavov, he was shooting the world's worst shots at the end of that fight. He does get tired in grappling fights that get long and dirty. He has given up his back before to Kevin Holland and these kind of guys. So you look at Brendan, Fluffy gets the demerits on his resume for getting hurt in his fights, but Brendan Allen also gets hurt in his fights, guys, and we should acknowledge that as well. He got hurt badly by Chris Curtis on a number of exchanges. He was kind of lucky to make it through that one, and Mavov didn't really hurt him so much as he made him really tired. He got hurt by Sean Strickland. He's the only guy to get finished with strikes by Sean Strickland at 185 pounds that's ranked in the division. Abus Magomedov is obviously a fringe guy, but he is currently not ranked. And so Sean Strickland's only ranked finish at 185 pounds, technically at a 195 catch weight, was Brendan Allen Allen. So I do believe that Brendan is a guy that has a suspect chin in his own right. I think that Anthony Hernandez has a soft body. Brendan Allen has a suspect chin. I think that both these guys are good competitive middleweights that could fight for a title. So the price is a little off here, but my pick is Anthony Hernandez. First fight was 7 years ago. A Imavov fight Brendan should have pulled out of. Dude was dealing with health issues. No, I'm agreeing with you, Aaron, that he's a live underdog. I got to tell you the truth as I see it. And I do think Anthony Hernandez is the better conditioned fighter, and he's got a little bit of a better process for winning MMA fights personally. I think if you look back, he's kind of like a more violent and dangerous Jacob Malkoun, and Jacob Malkoun gave Brendan Allen everything that he could handle. But ultimately, Brendan's a good fighter, and this is a big plus money price tag, whereas Jacob Malkoun was like a plus 200 underdog against Allen. So I think for that reason alone, the price is clearly an overcorrection here. But I do think Fluffy is as good as advertised. I just think Brendan Allen is also a good fighter. All right. Last but not least, guys, we got the main event of the evening. Henry Cejudo taking on Song Yadong. And in the last fight, I said that we had a live underdog, but I ultimately was leaning with the favorite. In this one, I don't really know what to make of this fight. I certainly understand why Song Yadong is favored. He is a talented fighter. He's a guy that has a ton of UFC experience. He's been in the trenches. He's stayed relatively active. But let's go back and look at his actual results. We've got a loss to Petr Yan. And I want to revisit this fight because I haven't gotten a chance to retape it. I thought I remembered his knee getting hurt in that fight. So if he suffered a knee injury there, I think that would be important to note. Chris Gutierrez, that win is okay, but I expected him to finish Gutierrez. I was a little bit disappointed with Song Yadong's performance there. I thought he was a little bit complacent in that fight. The Ricky Simone fight was solid. He got the finish there. He got the TKO, but Ricky Simone has been on hard times lately, so hard to know exactly what to make of that one. And also, we know that bout was rescheduled, a week. So he fought Ricky in April of 2023. He then had a canceled bout with Rob Font because he withdrew from the bout. So Song Yadong has just had a little bit of weird inactivity at times with the cancellations. The Alejandro Perez bout, he also withdrew due to a knee injury. The Science fight, it seems like that was on the Science side. So just a couple of blips for Song Yadong along the radar, having some injuries that he had to report. And I thought he got hurt in the Yan fight. So I will go back and rewatch that to be sure before I get out over my skis. Now, the Corey Sandhagen fight, I had Sandhagen by TKO there, and it was really close. I thought that fight was playing out, a bit closer than I expected. So Song Yadong, clearly very talented. Marlon Moraes, I bet so much on the Song Yadong KO, ITD, round one, money line. basically any way you could imagine in that fight. So he's a good fighter, but split decision with Casey Kenny, not extremely inspiring. Lost to Kyler Phillips. Kyler Phillips is a guy that, has one round of cardio against Rob Font, right? Like he basically was running away from Rob Font for the remaining 2 rounds because he spent too much in the first. Then you look at Marlon Chito Vera. That was a unanimous decision win for Song Yadong. It was extremely controversial at the time. Went to a majority decision draw against Cody Stamann back in 2019. Then you see him lose a grappling match. We saw him lose to Petr Yan. So when he's fought, championship quality guys, it's not been well for him, right? Petr Yan, Corey Sandhagen, Marlon Moraes fought for a title, so I guess you give him a pass there. But Marlon Vera fought for a title, super controversial fight. Marlon Moraes was clearly post-prime, and then Petr Yan, Corey Sandhagen are the other guys. So now you see, a guy in Henry Cejudo. He doesn't get any of the respect that he deserves, in my opinion. I've been around for a really long time in terms of the modern MMA fans haven't been watching that long, a lot of them. And so they don't have a lot of respect for guys that came a little bit earlier. And for me, Henry's been a guy that I've always respected since he got to the UFC. Rich is saying that he thinks Henry or Allen are the parlay busters this week. And I could definitely see it. When you look at this fight, Aljamain Sterling and Henry Cejudo, I was asked, like, what's your prediction for the line there? I said, I'd bet it to be -110. And I got suckered into betting Henry at -110. And then it went to a split decision. And I thought, damn, it was exactly what I expected. A close fight, played out extremely close. Aljamain Sterling, guys, was the bantamweight champion. He was a 135-pound dynamic fighter, extremely good wrestling, good grappling, difficult to deal with. And, Henry went out there and competed tooth and nail. And if the new rules were in effect where you could knee in the head of a grounded opponent, maybe it's a different story, right? Maybe we're talking about Henry Cejudo getting the win there. Then you look at, okay, Merab Dvalishvili. What do we know about Merab? So hard to get the jump on him. Henry goes out there, hurts him bad in the first round, lands a big shot on him, wins the first round on every judge's scorecard. So this guy has now taken rounds off Aljamain Sterling. He's taken rounds off Merab Dvalishvili. He knocked out Dominic Cruz. He knocked out Marlon Moraes. This guy is a absolute baller. Henry Cejudo deserves respect. And the Merab fight, he was hurt. He was injured. We had heard that during fight week. We had heard the rumors. And when you look at I'm not on Fluffy in terms of a bet. Let's be very clear about that. I said several times that I thought that Allen was the money line side, but I'm just saying if you press me for a pick, I would pick Fluffy. I do believe he's the better fighter, but I think the line is reflecting on wash, and I don't see that. So, but with that being said, back to this fight. I see a guy like Henry Cejudo, and I just say to myself, like, this is a guy that typically competes at a very high level, goes out there and competes. He's winning rounds off championship fighters. So could he not go out there and win rounds off of Song Yadong? I think he could. I don't know that he could really knock out Song Yadong. I think he could if he's able to take him down and impose his will from on top. If you go back and watch, Henry broke Marlon Moraes on the feet, then took him to the ground and finished him on the ground. That, for me, is where it gets interesting because we did see Petr Yan taking down Song Yadong, especially later on in the fight. Petr Yan, one of the most underrated wrestlers in the division. People act like he can't wrestle. He's a fantastic wrestler, but you're looking at a guy in Henry Cejudo who's an excellent wrestler. He's got inside trips. He's got outside trips. He's got double legs. He's got a few different ways to take the fight to the mat. And he's not the best control style wrestler you've ever seen, but he does have good ground and pound. He is a violent guy. He's got good power on the feet, and he's a guy that's an extreme competitor. So if Henry Cejudo shows up to the scales and he looks like he's in great shape and he looks like he's ready to compete, I feel like you might want to take a chance on him because a guy like Song Yadong is a talented fighter, but I don't think he's ever proven that he could break through at a level like this, beat an opponent like this. You got a guy in Henry Cejudo who is probably one fight away, even still, from fighting for a title. And I know that people don't love him, but again, we can go back and refer to this. Henry Cejudo is the second most popular star on this card. right? And meanwhile, you're looking at a guy, like Song Yadong. He's buried down at number 6. He's got 140,000 followers. Maybe he's bigger in China. So, hey, hats off to him if that's the case. God bless him for it. We know that Team Alpha Male has beaten Henry Cejudo before, so maybe they can lean back on that bag of tricks. Song Yadong is definitely a very good athlete. He's got some skills and abilities, some intangibles, but I think of a guy like Henry Cejudo as a consummate competitor, a guy that has a win over Demetrius Johnson, of all people, a literal all-time great in mixed martial arts. Controversial win, close win, but you see Henry Cejudo got 2 cracks at Mighty Mouse. The first time he got finished inside of 1 round. The second time he found a way to make it a close split decision territory. So you see Henry evolves over time. He gets better over time. And now maybe he's aging out. Maybe he doesn't have it anymore. But what I will say is people would fly from all over the country, all over the world to get training in with Henry Cejudo and ask him questions, pick his brain. John Jones, Yuri Prohaska, all these people flying into Fight Ready to work in part with Henry Cejudo because this guy is a good fighter with a brain for fighting who understands the game. If you've ever watched his videos, if you've ever heard Henry talk, he knows exactly what he's doing. Now, could he be ready to ride off into the sunset and smoke weed and sell Jimmy bars and fucking do his thing? Maybe that's the case. Maybe that's just the case with Henry. But ultimately, what do I know about Henry is he's always been a guy with really good sports psychology who turns up on fight night, who fights his ass off. He's got a pretty decent name behind him for these smaller weight classes, and he's got a championship pedigree at 125, 135, and an Olympic belt. An Olympic medal. So he's got 2 belts and an Olympic medal. It's like, yeah, that's a pretty quality athlete. That's a pretty high level guy. And even at 37 years of age, he's still a gamer. He's still a guy that could go out there and find a way to eke out 3 close rounds, in my opinion, against Song Yadong. And Song Yadong is a good fighter. He's got good power, but he's not a lights out, I'm going to win every round of every fight and nobody's going to touch me. We know that he could lose rounds. We know that he could lose positions. And the other thing is we know his scar tissue can be busted up and cause TKO stoppages. It happened to him against Corey Sandhagen in a fight where he was arguably, competing for the win there. So I think the same thing could happen against Henry. Henry will throw, big committed counter strikes when he gets the opportunity, whether it's elbows, whether it's punches. So I really like Henry as a fighter, and I don't think that he gets the credit he deserves. So if he loses this fight, it's going to be sad tidings. He's going to probably retire from here, and God bless him for it. He deserves it. But if he wins this fight, he's probably fighting one more time and or fighting for the belt. So I think that Henry Cejudo is still a relevant guy in this division. And Song Yadong has a long shelf life, right? He could still go out there and have a lot more success in the UFC, but he's never proven he could break through on this level. And for me, it's a believe it when you see it type of spot for me. So God bless him for it. I have nothing but respect for Song Yadong. I think he's a good fighter, but I also think that, that Chris Gutierrez fight, it looms large for me, right? Because it was an opportunity for him to have a breakout moment and he let it slip through his fingers. And Henry Cejudo, he's not, an easy ride off into that good night, I feel. He's going to go out there swinging, if anything, right? And that's who he is. So God bless him, man. I think this should be a fun fight card, and I hope that you guys have had a blast. I know I have. Thank you all for the support. I'm going to take this off the screen and just say thank you guys so much. I appreciate everybody being here. If you have questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and fire those off down in the chat below. We had a bunch of fights get announced late this week, late replacements, scratches, things like that. So I've been taping Eric McConico, Julius Walker, these kind of guys today. So I still want to go back and do a little bit more freshening up on guys I haven't seen in a while, a Veretennikov and these kind of fighters. So if I have any different thoughts, they will be in my article. Obviously, I will lay that all out in as clear a language as I possibly can. I think a lot of dogs are live this week, plain and simple. I hope that I did a decent job breaking this down. I've been lazy on the timestamps a little bit of late, so I'm going to try and get right back on that tonight. I appreciate the support, guys. The last big thing for the wrestling season is next weekend. So again, just giving you guys the heads up in advance. I'll have normal content out next week in advance of the fights. But in terms of going live during the fight cards and things like that, like I have done in the past, I put it all on the back burner, focused up. We got a great squad. We got some great opportunity next week at the state tournament to go and claim some hardware, but that's the next priority. Then it's right back to work. We've got plenty of UFC action week after week after week, just like we like it. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So God bless each and every one of you guys. Good luck on the fight card. If you're taking any action or not, if you're watching along for fun, go ahead and let me know your predictions. If you're watching along to make some coin, look for good betting opportunities. Let me know what you think the best bet on the card is in the comment section below. And if you guys have been here live throughout the show, if you've ever contributed in the past, whether it was a comment, whether it was something that you said in the chat, I really appreciate it, guys. I've been doing this for a long time, so the show has taken on many iterations, but the things that have been consistent throughout is I love the fights. I love talking about it with you people. I love having the sharpest chat in the game here, keeping me honest in terms of, hey, did you think of this? Hey, did you hear about this? Hey, did you see this angle? I really appreciate it. I learn from you guys each and every week. I hope that you guys feel the same way. And that's all I got for you guys this week. So today, I'm going to call it. I'm going to go ahead and timestamp this episode. I'm going to continue my research. I'm going to get everything else posted. I'm going to get my articles flying. And that's what I got for you guys right now. So thank you all so much for the support. God bless, peace, love, and chicken grease to each and every one of you guys. Good guys rise. Until next time, we'll see you all. Enjoy the fights.